Welcome to the Storyverse podcast, where we explore the power of stories in supporting our children's imagination, their growth, and of course speak to the experts. And today we've got an incredible expert, Julie Mallon, with us. She is a sleep consultant and coach from Nurture to Sleep, who's helped countless families make transitions from going to the cot, sleeping apart, and yes, you adults are going to get some tips and tricks too on sleep hygiene and can you really catch up on that big sleep debt at the weekend. Julie, thank you so much for your time today. I know how passionate you are about helping big people and small people get the rest that they deserve. Why is this such an area of concern and indeed passion for you? Where did it begin?
The more that I learn about sleep, the more excited I get about it. And I see the benefit with our children. I see the benefit with parents. And it really started when, as a midwife, I attended a lecture and they were talking about the Solihull research and about the importance of sleep. And that really sparked off my interest.
Tell us about that.
So they were talking about what parts of the brain benefit when a child is getting different elements of sleep, be it deep sleep, be it rapid eye movement sleep. And so, for example, for me, again, very nerdy, but it's really exciting. So it's only about 20 years ago that we realised there was something called sleep spindles in stage 2 of our sleep. Now, sleep spindles are there for a particular type of memory. And that's why, for example, when they did the study with the Olympic basketball players, and what they discovered, when they had a 9-minute nap, their accuracy with shooting and their precision of their play increased by 30%.
From 9
minutes. Now, the reason for that is because within that 9 minutes, first and second stage of sleep, it has the sleep spindle. So it really benefits. And we know, for example, that babies and children, that's when we have our most sleep spindles. So if we can get our children to sleep really well, not just about duration, but quality, then they're going to be the best version of themselves as adults.
What I love about your approach and how you work with families is it is very much science-backed. You know, the research is there, the passion is there, but there's still a lot of misinformation about sleep. What's the biggest myth you'd like to debunk about sleep today, Julie?
There are so many. But one of the biggest ones is with our children. Our children they'll just grow into their sleep. They will learn it at some point. They will not. Because sleep in its purest form is a learnt behaviour. It's like learning to drive, learning to swim, or learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody really gets into a car, turns the engine on, or very few, and then drives off. Nobody gets on a bike and pedals off.
So it's about creating the right environment,
yes,
the right circumstances,
yes,
and having boundaries in place around what is okay and what's not okay to give your child the best chance of successful sleep, to make it sound like it's a goal. But it is a goal for many, and it's something that people can carry through life and say, I'm not a good sleeper, or I have these problems. Is it ever too late to fix your sleep?
Never. One of the eldest children that I slept coached was a boy of 19. Now, he was at university in London, really bright. If you saw a picture of him on WhatsApp, very athletic, really handsome, a really lovely, kind individual. And he had 12 sessions with a psychologist because he was going to drop out of university because he was so sleep deprived.
Oh, gosh.
That didn't work. So he went to his GP, the university campus GP, who went to put him on sleeping tablets.
So not a sustainable fix by any means.
Well, first of all, in the UK, cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia is actually on prescription.
Wow.
So that doctor, and we know CBTI is the first line and the most effective means of treatment for insomnia. And so that doctor was really letting this child down because he is a child at 19. So the parents came to me because they had a choice. Do we give up everything here in Dubai and move to London
and support him
through his years, or do they come back here? And he drops out. But he was a boy that I coached. And this year, for example, he's in his finals. And I've already messaged him to say, are you okay? Can I help you? No, I'm absolutely fine, Julie.
Wow.
Yep.
What about the younger age? What are some of the common challenges you're having families come to you about with babies and toddlers in particular?
So again, age is really important. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's a 6-month-old child or a 16-month-old. collaboration is still at the forefront of any work that we do with our children, because it really is about building trust. So if we were look at when would be the best time to commence sleep coaching, there's a number of things, and we're looking at the neuroscience of the child's brain. So some children at 4 months, we know when they've gone through that huge sleep progression, not regression, but some children have the ability to begin to learn to self-soothe, but not all children. But we do know at the age of 5 months, a child is now accessing what we call the singular cortex of the brain, which means, again, they're even closer to being able to self-soothe.
And the importance of being able to self-soothe is that should they wake up in the night, they're not crying out for comfort, company, nursing, whatever that might be. They feel safe and secure and confident subconsciously about going back to sleep on their own.
Yeah, but again, it is that learned behaviour. You know, again, we know that according to all the neuroscience data, it takes 10 to 14 days-ish, depending on the child, to change the behaviour of a child. So at the minute, for example, I've got a little 6-month-old and quite attached to the pacifier. So the first thing we had to do was we had to, gradually remove that pacifier from being used in the day and only used as a sleep association. I've just finished working with this very, very sweet little girl, and she's 3 years and 4 months. And when she woke up the other day and she slept through, from 7:30 till 6:30, she said, "Miss Julie's going to be really proud of me, Mummy."
Oh, that's adorable.
But with this little girl, because she was so used to somebody being beside her, the first thing that we had to do was get the little girl used to, Mummy or Daddy not being beside them. So what I do, I've got a little game that I play with them for 1.5 minutes first. So like with the little girl, we had 3 glitzy stones, and we put these 3 stones, and they know that every 30 seconds I'm going to remove a stone. So the first 30 seconds, they've got to sit quiet for 30 seconds.
And they're counting in their head.
And they're counting it, and they can't get up and move, and they can't talk. And then I'll take one away, and then 30 seconds more, and I'll take one away, and then 30 seconds more, so that's 1.5. So we're beginning to get a child who's had a lot of support and who is in a bed, who can easily get out of a bed now. So we always start, with step 1, so phases.
And building that confidence and the trust piece as well.
Trust, huge, huge.
Can we talk about ideal amounts of sleep? And I know it's difficult, we don't want to do prescriptive, but medically speaking, there is a requirement of children to have X number of sleep as they grow up. Would you mind just outlining what parents need to know on that?
Very definitely. And again, as you've said, we are all unique. Now, we know that there's 2 mechanisms that we need for sleep. One is our circadian rhythm. Now, circadian means about 24 hours. Now, I remember as a midwife finding this so fascinating, that when a baby's first born, they have a 25-hour sleep cycle.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And, if a parent knew that, that would help them make sense. And it takes about 2 weeks of exposure to light and food to bring them round to a 24-hour cycle, but it's about 24. So your and my sleep cycle or circadian rhythm is slightly different. But generally, if we're looking absolutely from a neuroscience perspective, it's 24 hours plus 2.
Oh.
So there's that to bring in. Now, again, going back to our children until they hit puberty, roughly until they hit puberty, their sleep cycle is approximately 1 hour. And then as adults, our sleep cycle is 90 minutes. Now, when I say 90 minutes, that should now really make sense how it's not 8 hours sleep we all need. We're either 7 or 9 hours if we look at the maths. So for adults, it's 7 or 9 hours. Now, again, with children, depending on their stage of development and their age, and whether they are supposed to be having naps to support their sleep, then that's what's really important. But again, children are really quite different in their sleep need. So, for example, let's take a 6-month-old baby. If we're looking at the average, we know that a 6-month-old baby, up until approximately 11 months, their daytime sleep should be approximately 3 hours, but 3 hours is your maximum. And then we know that they should be having, in order to support all the development, their maximum should be somewhere between 11 and 12 hours. So that's for your children who are having naps. But even like, for example, when our children transition from 2 to 1 nap, it's still approximately 2 hours and then 11 to 12 hours at night. But if I think of a little boy that I was sleep coaching, 17 months old, and his sleep was really, really challenging. He was rocked to sleep. He had like 3, 4, 5 bottles in the middle of the night. But, you know, a parent will do anything. They are so sleep deprived.
I've been there.
Anyway, we got this little boy. He didn't need any milk at night, which, of course, children do not need after the age of at least as early as 6 months, depending on their solid intake. But what we discovered was that if this little boy had 1 hour and 50-minute nap, he woke up at 5:15 in the morning. If he had 1 hour and 40 minutes, he woke up at 7:15.
What a game changer.
10 minutes. Now, what was being impacted here, that extra 10 minutes? It was robbing his body of sufficient sleep pressure, the drive to sleep.
And that needs to build up over the course of the day.
Yes.
Here's what might sound like a basic question, but what happens if a child does not get enough sleep? In the brain, in the body, with those milestones?
So it's really important to put things in perspective. There is so much fear-mongering out there. You know, if your baby doesn't sleep well, or your toddler, their brain is not going to be developing, it will. But there are optimal environments for that brain to really develop. So, for example, at the beginning, with our newborns and with our babies, everyone is told, don't let them get overtired and don't let them get overtired. Now, again, if it was explained why to a parent, it would make so much sense and we'd take the fear away. So, for example, when our babies are first born, the brain weighs approximately 400 grams, and by the age of 1 kilo.
Wow.
Now, what that means is the ratio of cortisol, the stress hormone, is huge at the beginning on this newborn baby's brain. But really from 4 months, where we have that massive expansion of the brain, the impact of being overtired really starts to reduce.
So the brain's more resilient.
So much more resilient and bigger. The surface area is not being covered then. But we just need other factors which are much more important, again, like them being physically tired, like them being awake long enough, and also how they are falling asleep.
It's interesting as well to think about the impact of tiredness on behaviour in children as well.
Yeah.
You know, that we see a lot of misdiagnosis of conditions when actually a good night's sleep or a series of good nights of sleep make a huge impact. I mean, I know this in myself. If I'm overtired, I'm irritable, I make bad food choices.
Yeah.
And in children, this must be magnified.
Yeah. So can I say why bad food choices, I think, is really, again, so with us as adults, when we are overtired, our sense of smell is heightened. So that piece of pizza tastes that normally if you weren't tired, that would like, oh no, I've had enough. But because you're overtired, your sense of smell is so heightened. And that's true of so many things. So yeah,
I just thought I would be craving energy, like these quick fixes of, you know, sweets and carbs to try and perk me up a bit if I haven't had enough sleep.
So that's the bit for the science, but actually we need to bring it so that everyone understands why they're making these bad choices, but it's just because there's other things that are going on. Their sense of smell is so strong. The olfactory system in the brain is really heightened.
How interesting. And then in children, the impact it must have on ability to, I'm thinking really basics, focus in the classroom, you know, to share and, you know, have that kind of emotional regulation. You know, yes, of course, developmentally it's interesting, but for them just to be able to be happy little kids in a classroom, it's key.
I mean, it's a reset. Going to sleep at night is a reset. We know that in the first half of the night's sleep for our children, this is when the human growth hormone is released. So the deep, deep sleep. And that's where all those emotions get cleared out of the brain and all the learning that they've had during the day. That's where we're building the immune system, where the cytokines, that protein that's released to build the immune system, all that's happening in the first half of the night. And then the second half of the night is where we have a lot more rapid eye movement. Now, the rapid eye movement is so important for emotional processing. So, for example, if our children are consistently waking up at 5 in the morning, then their ability to process those emotions, to their impulse control, which is underdeveloped anyway, is really just struggling.
Can we talk about bedtime routine and winding down? And you alluded to it earlier around the pacifier being a sleep cue. It's just going to be used at that time for that particular child. what are some of the things that you can really implement to start to signal to a child that we're getting ready for bed, we're all going to be resting and relaxing, and make that a really enjoyable time together?
So I don't know why, but immediately I was thinking about 2 years ago, I spoke at this conference in America, and I was the only non-doctor in something like 220 people speaking. So it was a big, big deal. Anyway, I was able to go to, attend all these other wonderful lectures. And there was one lecture that they were looking at teenage sleep. And it was cross-cultural and economical groups, everything was looked at. And what they discovered with the teenagers, the thing that was going to encourage our teenagers to sleep and improve their quality of sleep was bedtime routine. That was the most powerful tool a parent could have, was a bedtime routine. So if we can build that with our children as toddlers and babies and toddlers and children, then we've set up those neural pathways that so routine is signals to the brain that allow our children to feel safe.
And what are some of the practical things that people watching and listening today could start to implement tonight? What would be some tools for the toolkit of the gold standard?
So one of the most powerful routines for all of us, child and adult, is to dim the lights. It's free. Anything that we can implement which doesn't have a cost is really important, but dimming your lights. And we are learning more and more now about the importance of lights. So dimming the lights for children about 5:30 in the evening, because we know that the melatonin, that sleep hormone, that's released into a child's system somewhere between 6 and 6:30 p.m. and leaves by 6:30 a.m. So reset every single night. But if we can really provide an environment that is going to support the melatonin, and think of it like a tap. So if everything around it is optimal, then that tap of melatonin can flow freely. So the light. And make sure that, for example, because another really important tool is the bath. Now, the bath is there for many reasons. First of all, yes, it's the most powerful tool that signals to the brain that sleep is coming soon. But it also has a really huge physiological reason. And that's because when the child has the bath, and us, for example, a shower, when we get out, our core body temperature drops by about 0.5 degree, that's all.
Okay, and why does that matter?
Because by dropping the core body temperature, it drops the cortisol, which allows the melatonin to increase. So it's a whole system that is going on by just having something so simple.
Interesting.
The other thing, which particularly here in Dubai, not so much in other places, but lights are really, really bright in the bathroom. So if parents can, if you've got a toddler, those battery-operated candles, and you get your toddler to put it on, so we're giving them responsibility, it's collaborative, and they are part of the system, part of the process. So that's a really important one. But the other thing is make sure that once your child has the bath, that they then go into their bedroom. They don't go downstairs.
And there's not a TV on that they're going to start re-engaging with.
No.
What about, as you know, passionate about books, what about bedtime stories? What role do you think they have?
They have one of the biggest roles within that sleep, because what you are doing is you are nourishing our children's nervous system. And why that is nourishing their nervous system is because we have two areas within our body. So within the inner ear and our skin, they are full of oxytocin receptors. Now, when a parent is reading in a soothing voice, you are activating, you are turning on these oxytocin receptors, these love hormones to our children, helping them feel safe and secure.
So the parent's voice is going to be really, as you said, making them feel safe. And then presumably if you're having your child close to you as well, skin to skin, we think about with newborns, but does that have an impact even into childhood?
Oh, completely. You know, again, if we're looking, again, going back to my midwifery days, but we know that from approximately 16 weeks in utero, the hearing mechanism within the brain of a child, of a baby, done. the girls would have recognised Mummy's voice. When Mummy started talking, when they were 19 weeks in utero, that's like, oh, that's Mummy. And then at 23 weeks, Phoebe, not Phoebe.
Our younger one.
Yeah, would have said, oh, that's Phoebe talking, and Daddy at 23 weeks.
So a baby in utero can start to recognise voices
and the dog.
On the outside world. I don't doubt that our daughters started to recognise the dog's barks because they actually were never woken by them. They didn't seem to be bothered at all.
But definitely, Tabitha would have recognised Phoebe as well. From 23 weeks. So what that means in relation to reading the story, when our children arrive in this world, they already are very attuned to your voice, but that means they're attuned to all the different rhythms of your voice.
Nuances.
So even if you say, it's okay, I'm here, and inside you go, they pick up on that. That's the bit that they really connect to.
So that wind down routine.
Yes.
Are there any bedtime stories and actually, how do you think books could be used to deal with tricky topics around sleep? About maybe sleeping in a different room, or the arrival of a new baby, or any of these transitions. How have you used them in the past?
I use them on a daily basis because our children's world is so visual. And we want to use all means of communication, and whether it's reading a story, whether it's role-playing, whether it's them coming to read a story to you, all of these things are really going to be helpful in helping our children transition to these different stages. So, for example, if a child was going to transition from a cot to a bed, way before that was going to happen, I would get the parent to read a story about a child moving to the bed, so the child can really start to process that information. If they had cousins, again, I would say, talk about your cousin, and again, get them involved. Talk about choosing the bed with them and the story. So all of those things, hugely impactful.
Can I ask about chronotypes? It's something I find really interesting in terms of people who say, oh, my child's a night owl, or, oh, my child's a lark. Would you mind explaining about chronotypes and how relevant you think they are in understanding our own sleep and our children's, Julie?
So I love this question, and it's something that I have been learning about for a number of years. But every day something else is coming in to say they're not sure about the chronotype.
Interesting. But
let's go back to the chronotype. And ultimately, we are either larks or owls, and there is an in-between. That we're an evening person. So what that means is, we talked before about our circadian rhythm, and basically it's about receptors on a particular group of cells that sit behind the eyes. Now, this particular group of cells, very fancy name, but it's called the suprachiasmatic nuclei, SCN.
Okay.
But this group of cells, now I'm going to see if you can remember. So this group of cells...
Don't ask me to say it. I'm going to say something like supercalifragilistic.
No, but yes. But this group of cells inform all the other clocks in our body about what time it is. So how many clocks do you think we have in our body?
Ooh, interesting. My stomach definitely has a clock on it.
Yep.
It knows when lunch is coming.
Yes.
Would your bladder have a clock, potentially?
Yes.
So brain, gut, bladder, let's say 4 just for luck. Okay,
so we have one master clock, the SCN, and then we have 37 clocks in our body.
No.
So if the information, and that's why I like for a child who's going to have a bath and the light is really bright, if they're getting the wrong information at 6:45 at night, 37 clocks in our body are now going to be thrown off completely. So chronotype is all about the clock that we have in our body. Now, again, it's about, some of us have a morning clock. So we get up and off we go, and we're our morning. So if I look at my family, so I've got 3 daughters and my husband. Myself and my second daughter, Melissa, we are absolutely owls, meaning our melatonin comes in late in the evening and it leaves late in the morning. Now, just to give you an example, so obviously I do know this, and last night I really wanted to stay up. I really wanted to continue reading what I was reading. But I knew that I can't, because I wanted my memory to be good for you. I have a responsibility for you today. But it really worked. I mean, I know I can stay up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, but I know I can't. So
here's the question then. If you have a run of really poor sleep during the week. You know, there's maybe you've travelled, or for whatever reason you've maybe just hit 4 or 5 hours a night. Can you have a big lie-in at the weekend and make up for it?
Okay, so there's two parts to that, yes and no. We've always, the literature is saying no, but again, it's beginning to change. And the reason why they were saying no, you can't make up for lost sleep. However, with the data that we now have access to, it's looking quite different. And a recent study where it included over 11,000 people, it was shown that if they didn't have as much sleep at the weekend, because the stress levels were different, actually they didn't need as much sleep at the weekend because of the stress.
I can identify with that.
Yeah, so if you're, during the week, you've got a long working hours and you're so stressed with work, so you go to bed and your cortisol level is really high, your sleep is disrupted, you're probably eating poor food, but at the weekend we know that we can be a bit naughty, so we might have an extra glass of wine.
Yeah.
We know we might have a bit more sex at the weekend, but these are all... Sex is very, very good for sleep. Alcohol not, but it is counteracted.
So it's interesting to think about context and circumstances.
Yes, we have to.
Yeah, and how it
and
all
we've never had that
interplays.
data before.
But then for both children and for adults, the consistency of going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, how important is that?
So that was the second part, because that's what the research showed, that even though, you know, things were good over the weekend, you could do with a little bit less sleep. But if you were too far off, so for example, if you slept in for 3 hours later in the morning, then that social jet lag that we talk about is too huge for the body to come back. So an hour really, a maximum of 2. And then of course, if you are getting up, say, at 12 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday...
I wish.
Monday morning...
Yeah, getting up at 6:30 is going to feel like a real struggle.
Well, it's like you've got on a plane in New York and you're getting off in California. So you've travelled to 2 time zones. And if you think about our teenagers, that's what they do every single weekend.
It's really, really challenging.
So it's about balance. So it's about recognising... We need to let them sleep at the weekend, but what would be even better? A nap.
A 9-minute nap to improve our basketball skills.
Well, you know, according to NASA, the perfect nap is 26 minutes.
Why 26 specifically?
Because of the content of that nap, in that we're getting stage 1 and stage 2, where you've got the sleep spindles, and stage 3, somewhere around stage 3, you are getting some deep sleep. So it is more restorative. So that's why they're saying 26 minutes. But again, you've got to find out, you know, some people might find it too long for 26 minutes and they wake up really groggy. But then, of course, you can take a nappuccino.
Last question, you alluded to it earlier, saying that you were reading late last night. Is it okay to read yourself to sleep? I often fall asleep with a book on my face and think, oh, is that okay?
If it's a Kindle, no. Because even the newest Kindles, the studies are showing us it's still delaying sleep. I think it's by up to 14 minutes. Now, if that's every night, just like, for example, with this huge study with the 11,000 people, by dimming your lights in the evening, each night their sleep increased by 19 minutes. Now, you might think, 19 minutes, not that much, but if it's every night, that's huge. So, going back to the Kindle, no. If it's a hardback book, again, think about the lighting that you're falling asleep, because if you've got LED lighting, then we know that is absolutely disrupting your sleep.
What about blue light?
Which is LED?
So our phones.
I mean, the genie is absolutely out of the bottle. But if you can sleep with your phone out of your room, this is absolutely going to be the best thing we can do. But also, we've got to do what is manageable. The other thing is, we have to recognise, and it's for our children also, that sleep begins the minute we open our eyes in the morning. Now, if we look at our phone as soon as we wake up in the morning, we have now set our nervous system, we've triggered the nervous system, so we put it in fight, fright and flight from the minute we wake up.
Seeing the notifications, I've got to do this, I haven't replied to that yet, this is what's on my calendar today, and we're starting the day in an anxious mode.
it's not even that. It's that when you're looking at the phone, the blue light that is coming off the phone is indicative of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have woken up at 6:30 and suddenly you're looking at blue light. The brain isn't clever enough to know it's the phone, and so it thinks, and then it goes into fight, fright and flight. So if you can get into a habit, baby steps always, that if you can not look at your phone, first of all, for 3 minutes, then and then 5 minutes. And so that's going to be really helpful to your day.
Thank you so much for your time today, Julie. Honestly, my mind's been completely blown by some of these sleep facts. We are going to be dimming the lights in the Farmer household tonight from 5:30.
Yep.
And I'll try to keep the phone away for as long as possible. But thank you for being with us today. Really encouraging that books can play such an important part in
huge.
That wind down routine, in offering tools and language for transitions and changes.
Yeah.
And of course, our kids being the heroes of their own stories as well.
Very, very definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Julie Mallon of Nurture to Sleep there with some truth bombs on how you and yours could be getting a great night's sleep tonight. And of course, don't forget, a book, a really important part of that magic recipe.